Hello and welcome to Likhawat. I am Gautam Chaube and this is a show about the books of Bharat, from classics to bestsellers, from fiction to non-fiction. The book this week is Amarjeet Sinha's Last Mile, Turning Public Policy Upside Down. The Last Mile, Turning Public Policy Upside Down explores the gaps and dichotomy between drafted policies and their implementation, and the last mile challenges which often make public services inaccessible to the poorest sections of society. It provides an in-depth overview of the dynamics between communities, research and consultation, and the implementation of policies for development. The book examines the implementation of government programs for poverty reduction, women's empowerment, and income generation for the poor, among others, from a people's perspective. Amarjeet Sinha, the author, is currently a member of the Public Enterprises Selection Board, India. He was previously posted as the advisor to the Prime Minister of India till 31st July 2021. A retired Indian Administrative Service officer, he has over 40 years of experience working in the government sector, largely in the rural and social sectors. He has had the unique distinction of having played a major role in designing the Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, the National Rural Health Mission, and in bringing about governance reforms and programs for rural areas concerning livelihood, employment, housing and road construction. He is also the author of An India for Everyone, The Path to Inclusive Development. Amarjeet ji, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I was reflecting on the title of this book. It has the term last mile, which is the essence of governance. It also speaks of public policy, which, as I see, is the science of governance. But then it speaks of turning it upside down. So tell us, what is the larger design of the book? What do you want it to be turned upside down?
See, I have been a very fortunate civil servant who got a chance to work for almost 4 decades in the social sector and the rural sector. And in all these sectors where communities matter, the realization was that if a program does not think through its last mile carefully, it doesn't do as well as those where this is the priority. So the question of turning it upside down comes in because often we have policy making which does not factor the last mile to the extent that it should. And thereafter, when we say that it has not worked, we say that the policy was good, but the implementation was poor. The argument that I have woven in this book is that no, the policy which is not based on the challenges of the last mile is defective, and we need to think through policy making from the other end in terms of what outcomes we are looking for, who is going to gain from the program, and what is it that we wish to achieve.
Your book is full of examples. Can you take one?
You know, if I were to look at, say, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin, which is very recent. So very clearly, policy making, I had the privilege to be part of the team that designed it. Our starting point was the Controller and Auditor General's performance audit report of the Indira Awas Yojana, which had castigated the program on many parameters, from slow progress to same design, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, to financial mismanagement and so on. So each of the weaknesses we wanted to resolve, and we did it by going to the field. We didn't just launch the program overnight. We had the best architects from the School of Planning and Architecture, IITs and others, travel all around the country to look at traditional housing designs, to understand what people want, what construction materials are available, locally, and what designs will work well for those regions. We designed about 270 odd designs and costed each of them, looked at the material And that's how the program evolved. We didn't stop there. We were trying to provide an end-to-end solution. We wanted to be sure that the benefit accrues only to those who live in a kacha house with a kacha wall and kacha roof. So what we went by was the evidence from the socio-economic census, which gave us detailed, granular information about the households who were in such a stage.
Right.
Now here again we connected with the communities. Once we had disaggregated the socio-economic census data, village-wise and gram panchayat-wise, we sent it to the gram sabhas for them to vet.
Very
Are
exhaustive
these
planning.
the genuine persons who don't have a paka house? To ensure that we also have correct information, so when we were approving, we said we will capture the picture of the owner before their old house,
Right.
which has got a kacha wall and a kacha roof. So as you are aware, we had geotagged every house on a cell phone anywhere in the public domain. It's an open website. You can see 6 stages of that construction. This again was connected to the field. Which house the person lived earlier to make sure that they were genuinely poor who needed this assistance.
Right.
Thereafter, 5 different stages till the completion of the house. The pictures are available in the public domain for anybody to see. So a lot of these design, then we realized where will all the masons come from? So we began a program for masons. We had so many instances of even women training, the Rani Mistris as we call them. So the more you connect with communities, the more transparent you are with the transfer of funds, with the designs, with this, what I refer to as demystification of what the program is about.
And this is turning the public policy upside down.
Absolutely. You begin from the last end.
Right.
People should know when their turn will come.
Right.
So what we had insisted with every state that in the Gram Panchayat building, you make it available who all will get a house in the next 3 years and when will their turn come.
Right.
So that automatically takes away a lot of the challenges that we face in governance, challenges with regard to corruption and so on.
Right.
So clearly when you begin from the people's end, then what you design is different from what you would do otherwise.
Right. Being an academic, your chapter on higher education was of special interest to me. And in that chapter, you flag a series of issues with the higher education, but mostly 3. One is, of course, educated but not employable. The second is the quality of education. And third is the allure of foreign degrees. So how do you propose to address that in terms of last mile planning, policy tweaking?
See, one thing is very, very clear, the entire idea of a developed India, it has to factor the importance of human capital.
Right.
Because unless and until we move up on the skilling ladder, we move up on the knowledge ladder, we move up on the employability ladder, the gains of development, for it to translate into an inclusive society, a shared growth, it's very important, and that's the lesson from East Asia, that's the lesson from the developed world, that unless you educate well, you don't move as quickly as you expect.
You're also one of the architects of Sarva Siksha Abhiyan.
Yes, I did have the privilege to work on the Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, and I would only say that, when it comes to higher education, the real challenge is that you need to give finishing skills to those who do not necessarily go for a PhD or for an academic degree. They are looking for employment, a large number of them. Now, that's why it's important that in India, our universities are characterized by what is called as a BA, BSc, BCom phenomena. Everybody wants to do a general graduation. Now, to that, if you add a certificate program in one of the final years or the second year, where a student pursuing a particular course in a related field, suppose I was doing psychology as a subject, if I have the option of becoming a counselor through a certificate program, it will improve my employability. If I was doing history, and if suppose I am trained like a certificate program in tourist guides, so services sector has many openings. Of course, industry also has openings. So a lot of the equivalence between academic and skill or vocational training, the mainstreaming of skills is an important challenge, because world over, if you try to run a parallel system of vocational, it doesn't get popular. Unless and until you build it on top of the academic system, the education system, that's when the gains from such efforts and innovations are most. And again, the lesson which is also coming from China,
They speak a great deal of the Chinese
that's right,
experiment.
how they invested through the Project 211 and Project 985. In these two projects, they took up about 135 universities and colleges, different sectors, from a dental college to a liberal arts college to engineering college, technology schools, computer colleges. But in all of them, the interesting bit is they gave it all the flexibility you could think of. They could get faculty from wherever they wanted. They could send their faculty to whichever university they wanted. They had more resources for infrastructure, for college, getting good professors from other universities and so on. But with that flexibility, innovation and autonomy, in return, many of them developed to become colleges which now find a place in the top 500 colleges of the world. So clearly, flexibility, autonomy, financial resources, all of them mattered.
Right.
So that's a model that we are also trying in our country, but some of our public institutions have done very well. The IITs, the IIMs, the NITs, they have acquired eminence, and the top chief executives all over the world are Indians on account of many of these institutions.
Right.
So we also have our success stories
Right.
in the publicly funded institutions.
Right. Amarjeet ji, as income rises, it's normally seen that one partner tends to slip back in the role of the homemaker, and in setups when there is not enough help in the domestic space, it's typically the woman who steps back. Would flexible work hours or some policy intervention, some last mile planning here address this problem?
See, again, I go by the evidence, and the world over, what the evidence is suggesting, we need to have a women-led development. Honorable Prime Minister talks about the 3 crores Lakpati Didi.
Right.
That's why we need to develop enterprise, nano enterprises, micro enterprises and small enterprises as we move up. The Rural Livelihood Mission is an example, started in 2011, but now we have about 100 million women as part of that movement across the country. And the lesson there very clearly is that we need to promote multiple livelihoods. It's not necessary that everybody pursues a single livelihood. Multiple livelihood means that if I am a farmer, I have incomes from animal resources, I have incomes from many other things, from some agri-related, forest and non-forest produce, food grains, horticulture, fruits, fiber, so many possibilities.
How does that translate in the urban space?
In the urban space, again, we need to provide wages of dignity, meaning thereby that the options and opportunities in manufacturing or in the services sector in the urban, we need to provide in such a way that productivity is high enough for wage earning households to live a life of dignity in the cities. And I think that's really the challenge. In India, we have managed to bring down the chronic poverty quite substantially, but we have challenges when it comes to wages of dignity, because there are instances where the minimum infrastructure that we need to provide for a basic level of decent life, we still have some work to do there. And I think the women's question, it's very important. If there are more hands at work, very evidently, the addition to the GDP, but more importantly, it also promotes the autonomy of women. And I think it's important because their participation, and as we find in India, if in the elections in India 2019 onwards, every election we have more women voting than men.
Right.
I'm sure in the workspace also, that's how we need to visualize and plan. And that's where a lot of multiple livelihoods and options and opportunities which are flexible, and which also, I think the gender question is not only about providing support for women. It's also about men realizing their responsibilities to the family. Because tell me, how many times when children fall ill, do men take leave? It's always the woman who has to share that burden of the health of the family and a whole lot of household chores as well.
Right.
So the double and triple burden is on the women.
In fact, that takes me to the next question and a suggestion that you make repeatedly in the book, that men should participate in domestic management, and which is pivotal to catalyze any meaningful change. As two men engaged in a dialogue, how do we convince our gender that their participation in domestic chores, taking responsibilities there, is not compromising the essence of masculinity? In fact, it's adding value to the nation.
You know, the best lessons on this I find from the women in their livelihood mission, the women's collectives. And the most interesting lesson is in households where women stepped out of the house to participate in women's collectives. Initially, they faced a lot of resistance from their husbands, resistance from their mother-in-laws, resistance from their children, that why are you going away, why are you not staying at home, and so on. But in many households, that resistance, when they saw the woman happy in working in a collective, in taking up micro enterprises, in helping each other, in building social capital, the attitude of men changed. A number of instances across the country in the course of my travel, I met a number of husbands of Didis working in the women's collectives and the livelihood mission, who with pride would say that my wife or my sister works in the livelihood mission. So clearly, when you attach value and when they find a certain identity, many a time the perceptions of men in those households also change when they find that the woman is happy, the woman is promoting diverse livelihoods, there is more income to the households, and that's when the real gender change comes, where men share responsibilities of the households and start looking at the woman of the household as somebody who must have autonomy, who must have work space, who must have an ability to grow and fully. So that's why the women-led development is the essence of the way we want to move forward.
Right. Another recurring theme in this book is the theme of migration. And for a lot of us who are not involved in planning or governance, it's largely an academic or a theoretical notion. Perhaps we do understand a bit of it at the personal level. But the way you put it, by 2030, because of migration, half of India will be living in urban pockets. And of those, half will be deprived households, which is a problem of humongous scale. How do we have policies in place, robust planning in place to tackle this problem? How do we increase the income of the urban poor?
Thank you for raising this issue, because I really feel that one of the biggest challenges staring India is the challenge of living spaces in urban areas. You know, at the pace at which change is happening, it is quite likely that half the country, like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, which already is half urban and half rural, most of the country will move in that direction. There are more opportunities, there are higher wages, manufacturing, services, all sectors. Though, of course, it is also true that in rural areas, many growth clusters have also emerged, which can be developed into urban spaces. And post-COVID, the good news is that people are not only flocking to metropolitans, they are also looking at tier 2, tier 3 cities or growth clusters where economic activity is possible. Now, if that is the case, one of the programs that I had occasion to work on, the Rurban Mission, where again the lesson was very clear, we need planned infrastructure like urban areas in many of these rural growth points as well. Because unless we plan for it, and the best lesson again, just as in China, for example, they create the physical infrastructure before they start the businesses in the city. We, of course, cities grow around us in a very natural way. But I think it's important to provide the basic guarantees, and also, education of children, of workmen who come to work in cities. The health care of households which live in urban spaces, urban and rural. So clearly, the development journey, or the pace at which we are able to move up the growth and development paradigm, I think it will require better living conditions. It will require opportunities for human development, unless and until all the children who come to cities with their parents in search of work, migration brings them there. We will need to provide for all of them to develop their fullest human potential, then alone we will be on the right track to the developed India that we are looking for.
Two of the chapters in this book speak of human resource development. And as somebody who has led and hemmed many of these projects, you speak of human resource development at the panchayat level, at the local level. What is your experience? What is the direction that human resource development in India is taking? What policy interventions do we need in this area?
In fact, very interesting, because the subject of decentralization or decentralized community action is very central to this book.
Right.
And there is good evidence for this, as I have presented in the book.
Evidence and repeated arguments in favor of decentralization.
That's right. And the main arguments, and not only, even if you look at the evidence, very clearly what comes out in the southern Indian states where we managed to tackle poverty more effectively, or in some of the states like Himachal Pradesh and others in northern India, where again our indicators are better than others. What comes out very strongly is the fact that states which rank high on devolution index are also the states whose indicators of health, infant mortality, maternal mortality, education, skills is far better. So there is a direct relationship between the levels of decentralized community action and the outcomes in human capital development. If that is the case, that is the route we need to pursue. And for doing that, we will need professionals in these regions. Rural areas, one of the biggest requirements for rural areas is good professionals. A good professional is more transformational than any amount of capital subsidy. That's a point I make here also. Now, we've been talking about local governments, the Constitution, 11th and 12th schedule has been talking about it. But the problem is that when we try to do so in a compartmentalized way, when we try to do so without adequately addressing the professional resource needs, that's why human resources become important. The programs which have done well, the Rural Livelihood Mission as an example, it has very heavily provided for human resources at all levels. The ASHA program in the health mission, for example, where a community worker from the community was trained to connect households to health facilities. They are able to provide better service. So I think a lot of the human resource challenges need to be addressed unless and until we have professionals where we need them. And again, this is a change which our system needs. The way human resources is managed, and considering that the bureaucracy was designed for regulation and public order, for it to carry out its development function, it needs a reorientation. We need more managers and magistrates to be able to function more effectively in the development sphere.
This is a show about books, and therefore the next question is only natural. There is this perception that the culture of public library in India lags so far behind other countries, the developed countries, and that resources and study material is usually unavailable. While we are working in that direction, in the sense we have e-portals and we have programs launched by IGNO and MHR, other MHRD portals, but it's still not creating the kind of impact one had hoped for.
Just to give the historical context, I'm sure you'll be aware that in India, during the freedom movement, one of the institutions which was a part of the freedom movement was public libraries. The state from where you and I come, Bihar.
Right.
Bihar had a very large number of public libraries.
The famous Sinha library in Patna.
Yes, and in rural areas as well, because there was, it went with the freedom movement of growth and development. So those aspirations, public libraries are also very aspirational. But unfortunately, as happens, many of them came into disuse over time. But clearly, if we want, and today we are talking about retraining, reskilling, upskilling, learning is a lifelong journey. And if that is the case, we need to provide community spaces. I can think of two very good examples, which I think I've mentioned in the book as well.
Right.
During the COVID period in Karnataka, for example, where they really focused on the public libraries in rural areas, that became one of the principal places where children collected and where gadgets were available for them to be able to take the benefit of online learning. We also, last time I happened to be a jury on the Indian Express Governance Awards.
Right.
In one district in Jharkhand, in Jamtada,
Right.
the collector was setting up public libraries.
Right.
And a lot of the school finishing youths,
Right.
they would come and consult there. A lot of old people would come there and read newspapers there. So I think, as a community institution, a public library has great value in building social capital and cohesion in the community. And clearly, it is very much part of the agenda that the last mile tries to spell out.
Right.
And that's about the social capital at local level for us to be able to get the outcomes that we're looking for.
One last question. Year 2047 is quite important for us, and as we are moving towards that milestone, we are setting out goals, perhaps best described as in terms of the title of your last chapter, India for All. So how do you propose India for all?
No, I think, that's a point which, there are many parameters on which as a nation we've done well. The UNDP, for example, in 2022, in its report, it said that India had successfully brought 415 million persons out of multidimensional poverty between 2005-06 and 2019-21. Now, clearly, we have managed to bring down what I would call chronic poverty. Very extreme forms of poverty have come down, though we had some setbacks due to the COVID. But post-COVID, clearly on many parameters, we seem to have gone back to high rates of growth. The macro indicators are stable. Thanks to the pro-poor public welfare focus, gas connections, bank accounts, rural housing, urban housing, many of those parameters, toilets in houses, we have done remarkably well and significant improvements. So the asset base of the poor, the deficits on the asset base which poor households used to have, a lot of them have been reduced significantly because of the focus on pro-poor public welfare. But along with this, there are challenges of education quality, there are challenges of health outcomes, there are challenges of nutrition, there are challenges of livelihoods and employment, there are challenges of wages of dignity. Now, these are the challenges. How do we build nano enterprises into micro and medium enterprises? Women's enterprises in a small way in a village. How can we ensure that those nano enterprises grow with access to credit, with access to knowledge, access to higher order human capital, so that as a society, most households, so it's always, whenever we talk about inclusive society or whenever we talk about a shared growth, it has to begin with these micro community organizations and institutions like the women's self-help groups and others, and they have to be given all the opportunity and support. They have to be nurtured for them to grow as businesses and for them to continue to maintain the community links, the social capital, which is so central to happy lives and healthy lives.
Amarjeet ji, thank you so much for joining us here for that engrossing discussion on public policy, and I'm sure our audience are deeply enriched and the understanding of the public policy has sharpened a lot. Thank you so much for being with us.
A pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you.
That was indeed an engrossing conversation and exchange of ideas on public policy and last mile planning. Meet us next week with a new book, with a new author. Till then, keep watching Sansad TV. I am Gautam Chaube. Namaste.